Hello everyone, my name is Mohit and I welcome you all to my YouTube channel. This is part 2 of Solving PySpark Challenges playlist, and in this video we will discuss how we can create schema manually and use that to create PySpark data frame. So in our last video we discussed how we can create data frame manually using sample data and list of columns, and we also checked how we can verify schema data types, correct? So in this video also, we'll follow similar steps and see what are the differences we are getting if we create a schema manually. Okay. So in our last video, if you remember, we use similar sample data. In this video also, we are going to use same sample data, which is a list of comma separated tuple. And we also discussed that these tuple can be considered as row of a table, correct? And the schema in our previous video which we used was list of column, and using this sample data and list of columns we created data frame and we verified the schema. But let's say we want to explicitly control the data type of different column that we are passing, then how we can do it? This is where the need of manual schema creation comes into picture. So in this video, we will see how we can create a manual schema, what are the different things that we need to know in order to create manual schema. And using this sample data and the manual schema that we will create in this video, how the data frame will look like and how the data type of schema will look like. And we will also check what are the differences we can point out in the data frame and the schema that we got from last video and using this video. Okay. So basically in last video we used list of columns as a schema, and here we are creating a manual schema. Okay. So these are the couple of points we are going to discuss today. So in order to discuss it, let me quickly switch to my Databricks community account. If you have not created your account yet, then I will strongly recommend to create your account. It's a kind of free edition. You can practice your things here. And these things I have already discussed in my previous videos. So if you need any help, I will put the link in description and you can also check the link in I button. Okay. So that we were using in our last video, and I'm going to use the same in order to make the things more clear. So let me run few cells which are like important for this video. Okay. So let me quickly recap in 1 minute what we discussed in our last video. So in our last video, we used this test data, which is a kind of list of tuples, and we use this list of column as test schema, and we pass this test data and test schema as a parameter of create data frame function, and using this we created a data frame and we were able to verify the data type of schema. And this is the point I was discussing, that we never mentioned what is the data type of id column, we never mentioned what is the data type of name column, still we are able to infer the schema. So how was it possible? That also we discussed. So if you run this one, in order to check the detail of this function that we are using in order to create data frame, we came to know that there was a parameter called verify schema with default value as true. So this verify schema will basically verify the data types of every row against the schema, and it is by default enabled. That means true. And when we passed these value inside this create data frame function, it like verified the data of this column, verified the data of second column, and it came to know that yeah, this is the data type of id column and this is the data type of name column. But again, this time we didn't have any control on data type of any column. It had just verified automatically, right? So in this video, we will see how we can create a manual schema and how we can control this data type and what are the other parameters that we can control while creating schema manually. Okay. So see, in PySpark, we have a module called pyspark.sql.types. Basically, this allow us to explicitly define the structure of our data frame, and the structure involves like what is the column name, what is the data type, and whether that particular column can have null value or not. Basically, null value is allowed or not. So we can control these parameters while creating schema manually using these classes. Okay. So how we can create it? So before that, we first need to know what is this struct type and struct field. So in order to know this one, we can use this help keyword. So you can run this command or cell, and once the things are imported, you can use this help keyword in order to get details about these classes. So let me run this cell. Now if you go here, scroll up, you will see that this is a class, and this struct type will consist of a list of struct field. Okay, so how we can do it, we will discuss it very soon. And we have already discussed that using this, we can import these classes. Okay, now let us check detail about struct field class. So if you run this cell, I can see that this is also a class struct field where we can define these parameters like what is the name of column, what is the data type, right? Nullable, that means whether the null value is allowed or not. Okay, so these parameters we can set in struct field, and this struct field is used inside struct type. Okay, now in order to check how you can use these two classes, you can refer this nice documentation. There are multiple examples given, and if we have multiple fields, then we can use comma and we can follow the same structure. So this struct type will consist of list of struct field where first parameter we can pass in struct field is the name of column, second is its data type, and third is whether the null value is allowed or not. Okay, so let us quickly create a manual schema for our example. So in our case, we had like two columns, ID and name. And for ID, we want data type as integer type. And for name, we want to set it as string type. Okay. And for this example, let's consider the null values are allowed in both columns. Okay. So how we can create a manual schema for these types of condition? So let us quickly scroll down. See, I've already created, but let me discuss it here. So now since we have already imported struct type and struct field and this integer type and string type, so now we can use these classes. So what I will do, since I have two columns, ID and name. So first what we need struct type, and inside this we will pass the list of struct field. So we can use struct field, and this struct field will take column name as first parameter. So we will write name equals, we can pass first column name which is ID. Now what is data type we want? We have already imported this integer type, and for ID we want this data type to be an integer type. Okay, so we will use integer type. Okay, so this thing, if you see, it is done for first column which is ID. Of course you can pass like nullable, and you can pass here as true. That means null values are allowed. If let's say for any specific column you don't want to allow null value, you can, instead of true, you will write false. So we have created this structure for one of the column which is ID. So let me quickly do one thing. Okay, now it is looking good and it is like easy to understand. This is for first column. Now we want same thing for second column, so we will put comma. Let me copy everything here. Let me copy this one. Now this row I want to set everything for second column which is name. So in place of ID, I will write name, and the data type for name column is string type, right? And again the null value is allowed. So nullable equals true. So this is the two column which we have in our sample data, ID and name. Now I will name this schema as schema. Okay. Now let me run this cell. Now the manual schema creation is done. Now what next? We will create data frame using this manual schema. We already have test data, this one, and instead of this test schema, we will use that manual schema. Okay. So before that, let me do one thing. Let me run this cell. We want to check the type of this test schema that we used in our previous video. So if I run this one, this is list. Okay. Since this is a list of column, so the type is coming as list. Now, if I apply same thing to our manual schema, and if I run this cell, you will see that the type is of struct type. So this is the difference. Okay. Now we will use this manual schema in order to create data frame. So for that, we can use same process. We can use this Spark object and we can use this create data frame function of this object inside which we can pass test data, which is a list of tuple, and we can pass manual schema, which we have just created here. So here we are not passing the list of column as schema. We are passing this manual schema that we have created using StructType and StructField. Now let us see how the data frame looks like and let us verify is there any difference in data frame. Let us see that. So if I run this cell, see it has created data frame. Let me run this command display df. So this will beautifully show you data in tabular structure. As per our discussion, we can observe here that data looks exactly similar and structure of this data frame is exactly same what we got in our last video. We cannot like distinguish anything just by looking this data frame. But we can observe one change if we run this command, which is like print schema. So on this new data frame that we have created using manual schema, if we run this command, which is like print schema, let me run it. We can see here that now the data type of ID is integer instead of long, which we observed after creating data frame using list of columns in our last video, right? So here we can see that data type is integer and data type is string, and we wanted exactly the same data type, right? Because while creating manual schema, we passed data type as these values. But in our last video, while we opted this list of columns in order to create data frame, we observed that the data type was long and we didn't have any control on this, right? But now using manual schema, we can control these things. So this is one major difference what we can observe here in schema. Okay, so you can control the data type by creating manual schema. And trust me, this is one of the very important and frequently asked interview questions. So please keep these points in mind. It will be really helpful in interview as well as in while you are working in a real-time project. These points will like help you a lot because in real-time project we want to control multiple things like data type, and also we don't want to allow null values in a particular fields due to some business requirement. So basically these are the different requirements that you may face while working in a real-time project. So please keep this point in mind. It will be really helpful. So now I believe we have got the answer to this question that how we can create schema manually. And this is the exact output that we got. We didn't see any difference in data frame, but we observed that we can control data type of schema. And this is the exact output that we observed. So these are the couple of points that was most relevant for this topic. Like using this module, we imported these classes and we used these classes in order to create manual schema. And we also discussed how we can control data type, how we can control whether the null values in a particular field is allowed or not. So these things we checked. And we ultimately created a data frame using this manual schema. Okay.